Guys, Kinich is coming, and in this video I will tell you about his playstyle, best builds, best teams, and constellations. Let's go! So, Kinich is a 5-star Dendro main DPS, and is the first one to cover this specific niche after Haitham came out more than a year ago. Haitham is still a very good main DPS in the meta nowadays, so it's normal to expect a 2024 Dendro DPS to be on the same level at the very least. However, the truth is that it's quite difficult to compare Kinich to Haitham in a direct way, because it fits on a different type of teams. While Haitham is a quicken and quick boom carry, Kinich is a burning and burgeon carry, and as a result, not only Kinich might fit on a completely different niche, it might also fit alongside completely different teammates. His affinity with these types of compositions is made clear by how his kit works. It all comes from his elemental skill, which makes him enter the Night Soul Blessing state and launch into an opponent with his hook. Through this, he gets to spin around them in any direction he wants and shoot Dendro attacks at them. This type of mobility is quite unique in Genshin Impact, specifically being able to attack while moving this much. Not only this looks quite flashy, it also comes with technical advantages like being harder to hit by opponents. Still, this is not equal to the immunity frame dodging provides, and wide range attacks from the enemies might still be troubling for Kinich as a result. For the rest, it seems pretty good, and since he can continuously change his rotation direction while he does it, he will have no issue staying within the range of things like Bennett's Burst, for example. During this mode, he has two types of attacks, a normal attack that deals a bit of damage, and a cannon type attack that he can unleash when he fills his Night Soul point bar, which caps at 20 points. This is where the reliance on Burning and Burgeon teams comes into play. Each Burning and Burgeon reaction generated by the team will give Kinich 7 points, meaning that in teams that include those reactions, he will be able to use more cannon shots than on other teams. These hits deal a lot of damage, and they are for sure the main part of his kit, so if you don't play him there, you will just lose a lot. While he has other means to generate points, like his normal attacks or some blind spots he creates on the field he has to step on, the reactions will generate the most points. Note that both his normal and cannon attacks are considered elemental skill damage, so using sets like the Shimenawa to increase his output won't work. So his rotations basically bow down to him using his normal attacks until he fills his Night Soul point bar and then a cannon shot, on repeat for around 10 seconds in total, which is the elemental skill stance duration. In this regard, however, his kit offers something nice and unique. In fact, if he uses his elemental burst while he is in elemental skill mode, the latter will be extended by 2 seconds in duration. This is something any character in the game could have a use for, as it effectively takes care of the time wasted by his burst activation animation time and makes him more efficient as a result. However, for Kinich in particular, it also has another value, because the burst activation window gives him an extra time frame to build Night Soul points, which means he can be able to use an extra cannon shot as a result. For this reason, without even going in detail regarding what the burst itself does, being able to use it every rotation with Kinich already has good value, meaning teams that include a secondary Dendro battery are a good fit for him. Having said this, the burst is both great looking and powerful, as it turns his companion, Ajo, into a giant black dragon that periodically hits opponents on the field on a nice AoE range. Damage-wise, it's a nice addition to his kit, and combined with the quality of life aspect I mentioned before, it's definitely a good ability. Lastly, when someone on the team triggers a Night Soul Burst, Kinich's cannon shot will get a damage multiplier increase. Night Soul Burst is a thing Nathan characters can activate by typically dealing damage through abilities of theirs. As it currently stands though, this is a pretty situational thing, since there aren't many Nathan characters in the game, and the multiplier increase resets after every cannon shot. So, it's something he can't take advantage of very consistently as of now, but it will get better in the future as more Nathan characters get integrated into his teams. Overall, Kinich is a Dendro main DPS who wants teams entirely built around him so he can propel his damage to the highest levels possible. This is different from Haitham, who, for example, can be argued to be just one of many factors to the team's excellence in setups like Hyperbloom, so his best teams. As a result, Kinich will often feel like a bigger contributor than Haitham's to his team's success, especially if you consider that for the latter, alternatives like Nahida Hyperbloom can be argued as fun enough replacements, while for Kinich there isn't really a character that can replace him as a Dendro Burning or Burgeon main DPS. The one issue I have with Kinich is that his hits seem rather single target oriented. They have some AoE, as his cannon hits in particular can hit multiple opponents if they stand close to each other, but considering he won't have a grouper on his team for the most part, I wonder how consistent this will be. On the flip side, he seems very dynamic, as when he defeats the opponent he has hooked to, he will immediately switch to the next one in range. He definitely has an advantage compared to melee characters in this sense, as it means he won't have to chase opponents around nearly as much. To make the comparison with Haitham again, he has less AoE than him in a vacuum, as for Haitham his mirror hits in particular have a nicer AoE range than Kinich's shots, but not nearly to a high enough degree to make it a massive advantage for Haitham. Honestly, I don't really think it would be a big difference maker between the two gameplay-wise. The one other advantage that could be argued in Haitham's favor is that his damage windows are more flexible, as the way he generates his mirrors practically allows him to swap in and out on the field while maintaining his damage properties. Kinich doesn't have something like this, as swapping out while his elemental skill stances up will make him lose it, so it definitely looks more outdated in this sense. Still, his windows are not very long, and maybe his gameplay dynamism will feel good enough in practice that him being an old-style DPS in this sense won't feel like much of an issue. Lastly, talent levels wise, you want to level up his elemental skill talent first, then the elemental burst one, and you can totally ignore his normal attack talent since it has no impact on his damage. Now we will talk about Kinich's themes, but first let me remind you that if you enjoy my channel but you haven't subbed yet, please consider doing so because it really makes me notice your support. So, themes. As I mentioned before, Kinich really wants you to use him on Burgeon and Burning teams. You can technically go and try to use him on other types of compositions, like Quicken for example, but the problem is that he really has massive multipliers on his cannon shots, so the Quicken procs won't make up for how much he loses by being unable to trigger as many of those hits. Secondarily, he fits pretty badly with the premier Dendro support, Nahida, as he's an attack scaling character. Nahida's burst provides a massive elemental mastery buff, which in the case of elemental mastery characters like Haitham and Cyno, constitutes a big increase to their damage, and is partially what makes Nahida so good on their teams. This is not true for Kinich, so there is little synergy in that sense. If you want to look at a good Dendro partner for him, that will definitely be Emilie for Burning Team specifically, as just like Kinich, she gains massive damage increases by just existing on those teams. It's not only that, however. Emilie is a nice battery and Dendro applier, meaning she will make it easier for Kinich to burst every rotation and will also contribute in making Burning more consistent herself. All of this means that it's very possible Emilie is the key to maximize Kinich as of right now. Still, this doesn't necessarily mean that you need her to be able to use him, and it also depends on how you look at things, honestly. If you find interruption resistance to be an absolutely instrumental thing to have on your teams, then she becomes replaceable by a unit like Kirara in the Dendro slot. While it's a definitive damage loss for the team, it might just be better to use for plenty of players. The alternative will be replacing someone else on the team, like Xiaoling for Deya for example. Additionally, if you want to use Kinich on some Burgeon teams, then Emilie might lose a lot of damage, because her turrets require a minimum burning uptime on opponents to level up and actually start dishing out meta-relevant hits, something that might be very inconsistent with a fast Hydra player on the team like Xingqiu. Assuming you use a Burgeon composition with a Hydra player, a Burgeon trigger like Thoma, and Kinich, then Emilie becomes very replaceable in her slot by someone like Bennett, who will buff Kinich plenty and also increases survivability through healing. Lastly, there are more traditional compositions like a Furina Double Pyrocore, a context where Furina can vapor hits and deal plenty of damage as a result, while still somewhat buffing her teammates through her burst. This works well for Kinich because Furina's Hydra application isn't dominant enough that it makes burning inconsistent, so his damage is for the most part preserved. On all of these teams that don't include a second Dendro character, of course, he will be missing out on using his burst every rotation, but since there are also pros here, it's still pretty great. This is especially the case if you have Furina's early Constellations, which can make it an unquestionable best in slot for Kinich all things considered. So, Kinich appreciates having Emilie on his teams, but definitely doesn't need her. Honestly, in a funny way, Emilie might need Kinich more than he needs her, because without him, she lacks a team that completely buys into her kit identity, while Kinich, without Emilie, still has plenty of teams that are coherent kit design-wise. Overall, speaking about his team damage, it looks pretty high. Like, not top of the meta Arlecchino Nuvolette level of high, but high enough that he will be a pretty good DPS in my opinion. This should be contextualized with the fact his damage profile seems to be single target oriented, so his team's damage output needs to be higher by default, but just going off of these numbers and the gameplay I've seen, he might slot into that tier right below the very highest, with an eye of regard towards boss type content, a niche where I definitely see him specializing in. Now, regarding his artifacts, stats wise he wants to build attack, damage bonus and crit, so pretty traditional. Energy recharge wise, he wants a bit in case it's possible for him to burst every rotation, like if Emilie or another good Dendro battery is on his team. In other cases, it's just not worth to build energy recharge on him and you should just burst every other rotation instead. Artifact sets wise, he has two main options: the Obsidian Codex set, which is the best in slot for all Natlan DPS, and the Reverie set, which is exceptional for characters that fit on burning teams, but is a bit below Obsidian overall. Alternatively, Deep Food is good if there is no other character on the team that can hold it for him, something that you never want to happen, as characters like Shenling, Dea, Kirara Constellation 4, Emilie and so on can easily use it, and that will always be the better option, since Kinich will always be the biggest damage contributor on the team. Now, weapons wise, his signature is massively strong. Main stats wise, it's not exceptional, since it comes with very high base attack and pretty low critical value, but in return, the passive effectively provides him a consistent 60% damage bonus to all of his attacks. This is partially because there aren't many great 5-star claymores in general, but the point is that you will for sure increase your Kinich's output by a lot by getting this weapon. 4-star weapons don't really even compare. Serpent Spine is decent, but its high crit rate value can make it a tough fit alongside the Obsidian Codex set, which gives 40% crit rate. The Nathan Craftable is fine as a free-to-play option, but a full 30% below the signature, which is a lot. Lastly is Constellations. Honestly, his early Constellations are pretty straightforwardly a massive damage increase. The Constellation 1 straight up increases his cannon shot's crit damage by 100%. His Constellation 2 makes him reduce Dendro resistance on opponents by 30% and increases the damage of his first cannon hit by a lot. Overall, if you like Kinich, these investment layers definitely have a lot of value, and his Constellation 2 in particular can help teammates like Emilie as well, since it reduces Dendro resistance entirely. Pretty expectedly, a Constellation 2 refined and 1 signature Kinich will feel like a completely different character damage-wise to a Constellation 0 free-to-play Kinich. The latter is still pretty good, don't get me wrong, but it sucks that there is such a gap, honestly. And there you have it, Kinich is pretty good. To answer the question the video title poses, is he a better Dendro DPS than a Haitham? They are honestly pretty tough to compare to each other, as I think I made clear earlier, but I will say that Kinich's team damage numbers give him a pretty good shot at eventually surpassing him, especially in single target content. And at high investment, it seems just straight up better to me, because his signature and Constellations are amazing. And with this, I'm done for today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and also go check the Shinoren guide I made a few days ago. Bye bye.